5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Following the height of 2020 racial justice conversations in the US, an open letter expressing concerns about Richmond, Virginia, serving as the host location of the next scheduled World Cup was received by the IQA. This letter raised questions about the safety and decision-making process of the bidding for IQA-hosted events. Upon hearing these concerns, the IQA staff and board decided to form a committee to evaluate, inform, and innovate the decision-making process involved in selecting host locations for IQA events, with the ultimate goal of making all future IQA-hosted events more welcoming, safe, and accessible for all attendees. Christian Barnes was recruited to serve as committee manager to oversee the formation of the BIPOC committee alongside IQA events director, Pauline. A call for volunteer was posted on all major IQA community channels, including Facebook, and messages to NGBs on Slack to forward this application. 15 applications were received in June. Interviews were conducted over a number of weeks, and committee positions were finalized by August 15th. The BIPOC committee consists of members from 6 different NGBs across 4 continents. Members were selected with attention given to the range of quidditch experience, age, gender, ethnicity, and unique perspectives.
Together, the committee decided to tackle the project in 3 phases. 1. Assess, consider the problem and create a process to tackle it. 2. Reflect and review information collected from the community and our own research to think of action steps. 3. Grow, pass action steps onto the IQA Board of Trustees for future short and long-term implementation. Jamie LaFrance's letter asserts that by choosing to host the IQA World Cup event in America, the IQA could be putting event attendees at risk of police violence, hate crimes, and known racial tensions to go and support a sport that has positioned itself to be inclusive and welcoming to all. With the troubling history of Virginia and other parts of the south region of the US, we must consider the locations with particular DEI lenses to assess their safety. Upon reading the letter and evaluating the bid process for IQA-hosted events, we decided to assess the IQA's criteria used to evaluate the safety and accessibility of a potential IQA event host, the current level of consultation with the community members about what safety and accessibility means to them, and the expectations of the host sites as IQA partners for events. Assessing issues. Before evaluating Richmond as a potential site for an IQA-hosted event, the committee first discussed what should be considered when researching and assessing locations in terms of safety, accessibility, given the aforementioned issues. Initial committee discussions involve looking within the IQA to establish our starting point, asking questions such as, what criteria, if any, does the IQA have in place to evaluate and assess the accessibility and safety of potential event sites? And what do safety and accessibility mean to the IQA? Given that the IQA's purpose is to serve its members, it was determined that greater community input would be needed in order to inform the organization's priorities in assessing event sites. What aspects of safety and accessibility are event attendees themselves concerned about? We consider legal restrictions that may make attendees feel unsafe, particularly concerning race, gender, and/or sexual orientation. We also consider the threat to physical safety attendees may feel, for example, due to police presence or crime rates in the area. Finally, we move to event site amenities and policies that may make attendees feel more or less welcome, such as gender-exclusive restroom access and event site security.
To gather community input, the BIPOC Committee identified 3 different categories of stakeholders whose perspectives on event safety and accessibility may differ based on the roles they serve within the community. These 3 categories are as follows. NGBs, which organize and support the teams they send to equal competitions. While they consider whether their members will attend an event, their priority is more likely to want advance notice of logistical details, such as an event's location, date, and estimated cost over factors concerning welcomeness. Athletes and team staff who travel to events with the purpose of competition. Their priorities in attending the events are a mix between ease of access to competition gear items and safety concerns. Many athletes and team staff travel to and interact with the location preceding the events for 7 days. Event attendees, volunteers, and spectators who make individual decisions to attend the event. This group will weigh the cost-benefit of attending an event, considering proximity, travel, expenditure, safety, and teams attending against the choice of attending a large event, amenities of the area, and other attendees, since the priority of this group is based on whether an athlete will enjoy the experience, weighing and welcomeness and safety of the location is a high priority of the individual. Considering the different perspective of the 3 types of stakeholders above, we created 3 questionnaires to assess the feeling of the groups. The questionnaires differ in the collection demographic data as NGBs are groups, but the same questions were asked of all parties. We made the questionnaires available to the entire Quidditch community by posting to Facebook, the EQA website, posting in the IQA members Slack, and offering for MCBs to publicize data collection to the members, national team participants, and general public. Looking over the Google Forms responses that we collected from everyone, we found that the culture of the locale and what attendees will interact within and around the site were a highly cared about factor. With this, attendees also care about the financial barriers that may exist when there are high travel costs to a particular site. The difference between on-site security simply being police, which carries an area of dangerousness, versus an organization that is used to run security for similar scale events were important. Another important note was increasing the access of medical supplies available for players, volunteers, and more as needed instead of bottlenecked through EMTs and athletic trainers for injuries. After we summarize and evaluate the data, we create 2 sets of questions. Firstly, we create questions for the IQA events department to ask to NGBs to solicit any more concerns for finalists during any bid process, and a set of questions to always ask potential bid sites regarding extra amenities that could be provided for attendees. More medical supplies, place to visit around locals, welcome packets available, etc. Finally, after considering the answers we gained and what the IQA could use for any bid process, we prepared for our conversations with Richmond Regional Tourism to evaluate them as a safe and positive bid for the next World Cup.
Our conversation with Richmond mostly covered the socio-political elements and local culture that could affect the experience of attendees of the event, both during their event experience on site and in the surrounding area over the course of the weekend. The full notes can be found linked in the article release, but the most important highlights focus on Richmond's view of an international Quidditch event, Richmond's pre-planning to confront anxieties around event security, bathroom usage, and weapons, which would happen with the IQA events department, and the overall positive direction the city has moved in regarding DEI, specifically in context of racial and gender equity. After considering all the data and our conversation with Richmond Regional Tourism, the IQA BIPOC Committee has come to the conclusion that Richmond, Virginia, and more specifically Henrico County, is an acceptable event site for IQA-hosted events. The committee believes that Richmond, Virginia not only displayed the necessary minimum criteria for a Quidditch event of an international scale, but sets a model that other event locations should look to meet in their presentation of event bids. This experience was a deep dive into how an event site will feel in the future as a host of an international Quidditch event. In the world of sports, we evaluated the location and asked questions that other organizations rarely consider when making a decision as to the safety and welcomeness of the locations that submit bids. Richmond Regional Tourism met all of our requests for information, remained flexible in scheduling, and proved that even before being considered for Quidditch, the positive direction of DEI work was happening as action steps to improve Richmond as a whole. The next step of the IQA will need to be planning communication and trust building around this decision in the short term, and making sure that the event bid process takes these themes into account for the future in the long term. We understand that the media within a country and how they are covered internationally greatly decides how onlookers perceive the country. This is particularly relevant given the current socio-political situation in the US, but should be considered more broadly by the IQA when evaluating any potential event host site. Common judgments and stereotyping of different regions and locales can perpetuate generalizations that can interfere with an evaluative conclusion about specific locations. We do believe that the history of places should be taken into account when evaluating bids, particularly ones that may be representative of a history of discriminatory practices. But we must also take into account the recent presence and efforts to move in an inclusive and safe direction for all attendees. The socio-political nature of a locale may also greatly change between becoming a bid finalist and hosting an event. The IQA will always need to make a continuous determination up to the event itself, confirming the safety of the site for all attendees, including players, volunteers, and spectators. The BIPOC committee believes that the IQA should work to communicate the decision to host an event from an attendee's perspective. NGB's perspective, competing teams, and other attendees rarely have access to the internal decision-making process of the organization. To ease their fears and generate excitement for the event, the IQA needs to market their event as well. These marketing materials can be created in coordination with event bid agencies and marketed to internal and external Quidditch stakeholders to advertise the event inside and outside the Quidditch community.
We could not have completed this project without the amazing work of the other committee members. Aside from the ones you heard from today, I would like to give a special shout out to all our other committee members. The BIPOC committee would like to thank everyone who submitted survey responses, Richmond Regional Tourism, specifically Jirain Lee, Director of Sports Development, for meeting with us, Ariel Hablum, and Pauline for supporting us through this process. and all other IQA volunteers who helped with everything from research and information gathering to translations.